Conduct business ethically and morally? Like, is that possible? Hypothetically, if we were to open a group or liberal arts club, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think ideally, yeah, you always want to conduct business with some type of honor and, moral code. That would be one of the driving forces behind allying all these people together is that you're leveraging that idea of accountability and organic growth, like you were saying, and everybody wants a fair share that way. I think people really aren't greedy by nature. I think it's a lot of times people take more than they need, and our culture encourages excess. So it could be achieved more, with a moral sense behind it. I mean, definitely it could be more effective if everyone works collectively with that mindset that everything is fair and balanced, and that you are getting something and you're giving something at the same time, but the root being that money is not changing hands. I mean, we all need that to live and survive. Greater value is generated by the fact that you're willing to trade your talent or your time or your labor for someone else's talent or their art, or because those are things that you've taken time to acquire. You've invested years of your life or your thoughts or your education into. So,
and the current marketplace might not always place a financial dollar value on what you do. Is that kind of what you're getting at with trade? It's easier for other people to value you and what you do because there's not a fixed financial rate.
Well, I think it is a fixed financial rate. I think that's the problem, is that it tends to want to reduce their labor to a number, or
like minimum wage.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because you're flipping hamburgers or whatever, you don't deserve a higher wage. Well, that's not the case. They just drive you down for profitability. I mean, when we stop treating people as the most valuable resource and start treating the money like it is, which is just paper, then you essentially reduce yourself to that. And it undermines those things, and it makes a disposable concept where you're not investing in your society, or you're not giving back to the community, or that you're not a part of that community in somehow or another. Then all of a sudden, you can, okay, well, Drogo, I'm gonna, give you, I think that painting's worth $10, whereas you spent maybe 100 hours. I mean, wouldn't you be offended by something like that? Is that somebody? But if you needed that to eat, I mean, it might be a different story. But
yeah, in other words, how do we, I guess my question is, how do we, what is the ethical or moral way to value things? Should it always be based on what other people are willing to pay for it, like in the current market condition? Or, like, I think what you're advocating is you create a new market through people deciding amongst themselves what their work is worth relative to somebody else's work.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. It's more of a negotiation than it is you put a price tag on something and say, okay, well, this is what I think it's worth. But at the same time, if they're more in touch with, what they do, and that's why I'd never, subscribe to say, okay, well, this is worth, I'd say, would you be willing to take this for that, or
right.
However, but if I look at something and I know that someone has a massive amount of time into it, I'm not going to sit down and go, okay, well, what's minimum wage? And, okay, this person, you know what I'm saying? Oh, well, minimum wage is this, and this guy has 40 hours into it, so this is what I'm going to offer him. I mean, if you're, I mean, it would be more of a barter, definitely, a bartering arrangement. But I think that's the problem with the current system, is that people don't realize that they're trading their time for money and their time on this planet, and that's time that you can't get back. That's really what you're doing every day you go to work.
So that begs the question: how much is a life worth? Like, how much is a year of life worth? How much is your time worth? Like, these are questions I'm not sure how to answer when you look outside of a fixed career or something.
Well, I mean, I guess it's how much you need to survive, is what it comes down to. And the way the paradigm's set up now is that you need lots more and more all the time to, make those ends meet. But I guess if you're not living in like a cardboard box or something like that, I mean, maybe it's not exactly practical, but if people understand what the value of their time is, I think that you could change that. I think that too much it just puts the wrong people into the driver's seat of your future because they dictate what you can afford. And instead of saying, hey, well, you got a leak out here. How about I come down here and work on your house for a couple hours and, you do a painting for me, or you help me, draft this manual or something like that. I mean, it takes the money out of the equation, and at the same time, you understand what value my skills had, and I understand what values your skill had.
But that makes sense to me, but then how do you pay your bills? Like, you have to always have the current economy and the way that the laws are set up, you still have to pay bills with cash or, credit with the bank or something.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a long-term shift in the paradigm that would have to happen. I mean, but it's not until people start valuing their time again that it would. And I think just by leveraging little things like that, setting up an arrangement where it puts you into touch with somebody who, if you want to take violin lessons and they want to learn gardening, I mean, you're brokering those things, you're building relationships, you're building back your community. It reduces the value of, or reduces the amount of money that you have to spend on things, and increases the value of your life and someone else's. But yeah, I mean, you can't step out of that. I mean, ideally, yeah, I mean, if they had monkeyed around with inflation and hidden taxes on all these people all the time, and the cost of ownership long term of a home, and you can never get, even if you grew your own food and you set up a perfect scenario where you have a friend that can do everything that you need or want done, or someone you can teach you, or
that would be magical.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, man. I mean, it's kind of, I guess that's utopian-esque, but I mean, at the same time, it shouldn't cost so much to live, man. I mean, and it's intentionally rigged that way to make us consumers.
So yeah, what's up with the price of produce, for example, like, all right, vegetables, are they underpriced? Are they subsidized? Like the current value with dollars? I mean, is this something we can even talk about reasonably when you start thinking outside the box, or like when you go to the grocery store? Is that you're paying like a subsidized rate, or do you think they should be priced higher in dollars, or?
Well, I mean, I think one of the big problems there in produce is that a lot of stuff comes from outside the country, and it helps to regulate the price, but then you lose quality, and you're also sending jobs outside the country. So, I mean, I try to buy local whenever I can, and if I can, at least I try to buy something that's made in America. But the government monkeys around with that. They subsidize corn and soy, and a lot of times they're paying the farmers not to grow so they can keep control of the price of food worldwide, and supposedly to keep farmers profitable. But I think that's not the case. I think it just worked to consolidate everything into corporate farming.
Yeah, because my thoughts are that because minimum wage is kept so low, which seems like, in other words, it's not a living wage. When most people are paid very little, and then they're given that amount to purchase vegetables or food at the grocery store. I think we're keeping the prices of vegetables artificially low because there's a lot of risk and there's a lot of effort that goes into growing vegetables, and I know that from
sure, absolutely
growing them.
Yeah.
So there's a real problem, it seems like, with the pricing of not only wages but also with the produce.
I think they go hand in hand, like you're saying, because if they paid pickers and stuff. I mean, like right now, a lot of you have a lot of migratory pickers that undocumented workers that come into California for the season. It's been that way for 50 years, 100 years, or however long they've been doing it. But yeah, if they legitimize like local business, if they want to subsidize things, start subsidizing your local farms. I mean, that would be the thing, ideally, because people don't realize so much of it is consolidated now as corporate farming. Right. It's not at the local level. And yeah, of course you have to pay those people decent money. I mean, and if you see a spike in the cost of produce, then so be it. But at the end of the day, as long as that wealth paradigm is not pyramided, it goes right back into your local system. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've done what they have, is because it made it easier for corporations to scoop up massive amounts of food, production facility and control it, and then consolidate the pricing. And if they want a subsidy, they buy a congressman. If they don't, then we pay for it, somehow or another. But yeah, I mean, it's James McCormick. I was telling you about him before. He's set up this program up outside of Martinsburg, where he's trying to turn veterans into farmers, and he's trying to actually legitimize farming as re-legitimize it as a solid, foundation of profession. I mean, and I think he's on the right track with that type of thing, because if you can take people and demonstrate the value of local produce and the consumer cycle of everything, you can keep it more local. That way you can control the price yourself. I mean, if you have 10 farms growing cabbage, they're going to sort it out what the market is. But if you're bringing that cabbage or whatever from California that's still ridiculously going over highway systems and tractor and trailers instead of futuristic bullet-type trains that would ride on a cushion and use magnets and electricity. I mean, not that locomotives don't. It's just another one of those things where, we don't need all that traffic on the road. We don't need to be wasting all that petroleum, putting everybody at risk.
Right.
If they're going to keep with the system that they're doing, then they should at least figure out how to get it from point A to point B as cheaply and as environmentally consciously as possible. I mean,
efficiency.
Yeah, but I mean, they're always going to mess with the price of food. As long as they can. It's the things that scare me is, that the government's trying to consolidate all of it and regulate it. Not that regulation's a bad thing, but sometimes the government gets unrealistic about things. I mean,
I think if the wages are kept artificially low,
it makes it not profitable and people don't want to do it.
The majority of people cannot buy the goods at the prices that they're worth. If you don't have enough income, you simply can't purchase what you need to live on. You can't buy the rent, the food.
I mean, you could always encourage urban horticulture like you are, or agriculture.
Right.
I mean, like they're doing in Detroit, retaking some of this public land and turning it into community gardens. I mean, we could definitely grow enough food to feed our homeless population. And even if they revamp some of the social programs like they have, instead of just giving these people EBT cards, how about you give them, some type of incentive to go down and plant their own food and grow it, if they're in a city type environment. I mean, things like that. There's a lot that could be done. I don't think that is.
No kidding. And it brings up the issue of like whether, homelessness is a legitimate lifestyle, because Native Americans, I think, were almost entirely obliterated because we didn't value the freedom of land use. In other words, every time settlers from Virginia onward moved out, we were constantly, like in this area, said, oh, Native Americans there weren't very many in this area, so it was okay for us to settle it. And we always found excuses to keep claiming land, like planting the flag and going,
right, fencing it up and
this is ours, right?
Ordering it off,
right, and saying this is ours. They had a totally different perspective on land use. They weren't like this quadrant is ours. They were just like this general area we use for hunting and gathering and tribal use.
Yeah, this is where we live.
But we're not always living in that spot. See what I'm saying? Like as settlers, we were like, this spot is ours. We claim this.
Yeah, that's a lot less impact. I mean.
See what I mean? Like that. So almost like their way of living was almost like a homeless way of living. In other words, their village can move.
Right. It's like nomadic.
Nomadic.
To a certain degree.
So I mean, you see what I'm saying? Like maybe it takes a different perspective on like property ownership and land use. I don't know.
Well, no, I think that ideally that I don't understand why that couldn't be applied to public land as it is. I mean,
homeless people.
I mean, we got all this, the DNR and all these regulatory agencies that it just makes me think that a lot of times the public land is like the king's hunting grounds in the Roman Empire type deal. It's
cut your hand off if you.
Yeah, exactly. You get done poaching and stuff. I mean, but at the same time, they're selling off like certain areas to be logged out or strip mined and stuff like that, and the American people are oblivious to them. But like you said, You go out there and try to squat on it.
I know.
You know,
It's like, you know,
you're no good motherfucker.
The homeless
you must go to
person,
jail.
yeah, the homeless person's impact is this much, and then destroying a mountain is like this much. In perspective, we reduce the homeless person's life, which has minimal impact to like, but we totally allow by law the destruction of entire mountains.
Right, exactly.
I don't know.
It's a fucked up mess, man. There's no way around that. But I mean, you're right. I just, to me, it seems like that, you know, they could leverage that. But I think a lot of people, I think there's a certain amount of people out there that want to be homeless and they're comfortable
Right.
with it, and that
They don't like shelters. A lot of homeless people, like my friend Alan, didn't like shelters because especially if they're not a aggressive person, because there's aggressive people at the shelters.
Sure.
And they'll take their stuff, they'll bully them.
Yeah, there'll be a hierarchy anytime that you get people together, man. I mean, it's just like primate animals, man. They're gonna, and you're right. Some of them people are just better off. They want to operate outside the system and without friction, and you know. But you know, why we couldn't build low impact housing in some of these, you know, if people wanted to live in that type of, you know, like a homestead style deal where, you know, someone has a little tract of land here that, you know, that's public land that they let you use, that, you know, like I said, you're not going to build anything long term. You're not going to set up a fence or any crap like that. It's just going to be,
or if you do, it can be
it's something that, you know, just like early settlers, I guess. Yeah, I mean, why they couldn't do something like that, you know, that's definitely a good point. You know, it's a shame really that you know, if these people want to expatriate our society, that they have kind of no recourse. There's really nowhere to go, because you know, you end up in an urban center somehow or another. You always end up in a city type. You know, I've never known people to be homeless out in the country, of course, but you know, they could obviously be out living in the woods and you know,
off the grid,
clandestinely, or you know, however.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a good point. Early settlers and homesteaders, like, that's a middle ground between urbanization and nomadic life in the wild. So yeah, there's definitely some qualities about our frontier, the history of our country. The frontier lands were a middle ground where you have mixed families of Native Americans and settlers, even when there wasn't conflict. I mean, we always hear about like the killings that went on between the two sides, but I know for a fact there were also mixed families. And
well, I'm sure that you have disagreements. I mean, I don't think any society is ever in harmony and balance, especially if it's, you know, a scenario where you're integrating in with another race or culture. You know, it's not as copacetic as everyone wants to believe, but I think, you know, most of the time people don't want conflict. I mean, but yeah, it's inevitable. But it's a shame, really, because I think that you know, with you know, the backbone of our, you know, American heritage coming from all kinds of different European cultures and whatnot, is kind of the people that came here. Early people that came here obviously had to have a pioneer mentality. And whether that, I think is never went away with some people. I think, you know, to shortcut things. Obviously, some people have mental issues that are homeless and whatnot. I think there's a lot of people out there that just aren't caught up in the trappings of modern society. I mean, they're looking to, you know, pioneer and forge and you know, do their own thing and be self-reliant. And there's no proper venues for them to exercise that, man. And it's probably not as glamorous as some people would like to believe, but I see that at some point our society is going to return to that, whether it's...
There's a freedom to it, even if you might die during the winter time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're living your own life outside of, you know, convention, and I mean, it's you against the world, man. I mean, nothing else could be purer at that point.
That's what I think. I think West Virginia needs to have a bit of that hillbilly revival, because we've been so corporatized to the majority of West Virginians to want to worship the companies, to provide jobs, to provide that store that you go to use your money to purchase the things at that store. Whereas the old hillbilly way was, no, you're independent, your family works the land, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, maybe you have a trading post or something like that, where, you know, you go get expendables.
But like you're saying, you trade things.
Yeah. Exactly, man. I mean,
To me, that makes sense.
where my dad was from back in Beckley, West Virginia, it's pretty deep back in there. They had a general store
Yeah.
in the area, in the mountains, and it very much evolved from an early trading post. And
Yeah.
you know, sugar and that would be a commodity. Wheat flour obviously would be, those types of things. But you cruise down to those places maybe, once a month or once every so many months when
Depending
you
on
ran
how far
out.
you live from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you grew your own food or you traded with people who did, and you shot and butchered your own game, or maybe you raised some feed cattle or pigs or chickens or something like that, man. Or that you had to still have these little pockets and communities of people, like you're saying, that toughed it out together, and they valued self-reliance and
Yeah, because the trappings of the, do you see what I'm saying? Like the trappings of the corporate world tends to create, like, pollute our water, and like, so.
Sure, man. They want you to be a consumer, and they don't see the long end game of it, man. They want to trap you into needing something, and
Whereas if there's one person dumping their crap into the water, whether it's just pooping in it or something, you can actually go up to them and go, hey, stop shitting in the public.
sure.
I use that water.
Or grab your torch and pitchfork, man. You have mob rules, man.
And you can apply some pressure that's not even violent sometimes. You can use social pressure to be like,